Here we are at audio 3 for week 10. So we're looking now at slide 9, and you can see this, I like to call it, the cow tongue, a gigantic cow tongue dropping down into the South China Sea, which represents China's idea of what its territorial waters and undisputed claim should be in the South China Sea. These claims date back before the 1970s. It was really only in the latter stages of the Cultural Revolution, as far as I can see, that this particular claim was being publicly advanced by the PRC. And again, I don't have the full details, but I would conjecture that that oil deposits had something to do with it. But as with the Senkaku or Diaoyutai Islands, back then China had very little naval power and no maritime oil drilling capacity. Now, however, the situation is much different. China is developing a blue water navy, which enables it to project power into at least the near seas off its coast, and it has a very active and a very competent offshore oil arm in CNOOC, the China National Offshore Oil Corporation. So it's possible to make these claims and try to back them up, and indeed the Chinese Navy has been active in this area. And it hasn't so much been, by the way, the Coast Guard. It's also been the Navy. Now, why is that? That's because the foes, potential foes anyway, that China faces in this area are not Japan, the country that once defeated China in a war. They are the Philippines, they are Malaysia, and Brunei, and Vietnam. I don't know if I agree with what our author is saying in this week's reading about Indonesia being a potential opponent here with the Natuna Islands, because as far as I can see, the Natuna Islands lie outside of this claim. In any case, China is less opposed in this part of its periphery than it might be in the East China Sea, where the Senkaku or Diaoyutai Islands are. So this is another area that has been termed a core interest of China, which could cause trouble between China and other countries. As you can see, this claim brings Chinese territory, notional Chinese territory anyway, pretty much not quite to the shoreline, but to the territorial waters of its neighbors, and none of these neighbors are going along with this. They're trying to handle this dispute through ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and so far China is avoiding that approach. They would rather deal with nations one by one, because of course the power calculation would be more in China's favor that way. Let's go on to slide 10. As far as I know, Burma, or Myanmar, has not been named a core interest of China, but it is a very strongly held interest nonetheless. There have been long-standing bilateral relations dating back to 1962. There was also Chinese support for guerrilla forces in Burma, which didn't do much to advance relations at the time. But since the 1990s, China has invested heavily in Burma, and not in ways, unfortunately, for the bilateral relationship that have been intended to benefit the population of Burma itself, mostly in ways intended to benefit China. Now, this is nothing unusual. One large, rich nation seeking resources in a smaller nation and not playing cricket, as it were. But it's interesting that in this case, Burmese resentment, not only popular resentment, has grown, but suspicion on the part of the Burmese military junta about China's ultimate intentions have grown. And this is one reason, besides other factors that I think we've touched upon a little bit, namely that the Burmese military junta, which wishes to survive above all, not end their lives hanging from a lamppost somewhere, being cheered on to their deaths by a hostile crowd. They wish to survive, and they wish to maintain their standard of living, to which they've become accustomed. If you join the military in Burma, if you haven't struck it rich, you have connected yourself up to the most powerful sector of society. Unfortunately, this is also the sector of Burmese society which is the most reviled by the general population, and at this point the Burmese military and the regime that governs it seem to exist entirely for their own existence. A parallel which could be drawn to North Korea, where we regularly read about North Korean elites socking away money, buying expensive automobiles, having access to expensive liquors and other imported goods, while their population starves. There also is a country where the leaders are becoming more and more interested to avoid ending their lives at the hands of a large crowd of people who are very upset. And so the core interest of the North Korean regime, as well as the Burmese regime, is to perpetuate their own rule. And in that, they have an ally in China. However, the Burmese regime has a problem that the North Korean regime doesn't have. That is, they have a pesky, popular leader who once won an election back in 1988. That is Aung San Suu Kyi. Aung San is her family name, and that is the name of her father, who was a independence leader during World War II and before, and became a national leader when the British left, but died soon thereafter under circumstances that I don't understand completely, but I know are not very good. Aung San Suu Kyi won an election in 1988, a popular election where she would have been declared the country's leader had not the military intervened and decided to place her under house arrest. There is a good movie that I've read. It has good reviews anyway, about Aung San Suu Kyi. I believe it's called The Lady. That is The Lady. It stars Michelle Yeoh, who was once a Bond girl, but is quite the actress in her own right, and is a very good depiction of the recent life of Aung San Suu Kyi, who, if placed before a popular vote, would probably win overwhelmingly in Burma, and various forces have conspired to bring Burma into the 20th century, now that we're in the 21st. One of them is the United States. The United States, for strategic reasons, not so much the old evangelical democratization stuff that tends to be in the New York Times, but for geopolitical reasons, the United States is highly interested in Burma because it would like to make sure that the Chinese do not completely control that country. One reason is this pipeline you see depicted on the map on slide 10. This pipeline would enable China to bring oil from the Indian Ocean straight into China without ships having to transit the Straits of Malacca, excuse me, which are an easy choke point. That being said, the United States is also interested in simply making sure that China's power is kept within bounds. And so this is one reason why the U.S. is very interested in what's going on in Burma. Let's go on to slide 11 and talk about some of this non-military softer power. You can see that China's exports and imports to the ASEAN countries, again, that's the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, that their exports and imports have grown over the last decade and a half, and that they are only going up. The power of the Chinese yuan, or the renminbi, that's what's the symbol? I think the symbol is CNY. You know, you have USD for US dollars, GBP for Great British Pound, FFR for French franc, and so on. Not that they have that anymore. They're on the euro now. The renminbi, the Chinese yuan, has become an international currency of its own in the area around China's periphery. Although that currency has been kept low in value by the Chinese government for their own economic reasons connected with the domestic development, the renminbi can be used freely in buying and selling things along China's periphery, including in Hong Kong and Macau. Anyway, as I say here in these bullets, economically, China's power has expanded to the west and to the north and into Southeast Asia, but their political growth, their political influence is very limited. It remains limited largely because of what we'll talk about in slide 12, but I'd better stop this recording before it fails on me, and we'll go on to audio 4, slide 12.